So I'm coming to this fight late in the day. Today's Monday, I'm recording this Monday evening, but I've only actually just been able to watch Ian Lewison versus Joyce. And I thought it was a very interesting fight actually, so I wanted to put some time aside, record a video, stick it out there and see if my opinion on this fight agrees with the masses. Now I was away this weekend, it was a fairly hectic one for me. I was on a stag do, so not only did I miss the fight, I also missed a lot of the surrounding coverage. But my impression from Twitter, and this is literally from 10 or 15 people who tweeted me or so, was that the general consensus was that this was a fairly average performance from Joyce. Now, I might have got that completely wrong. The public perception may have been that this was a fantastic performance from Joyce. But just from the very, very small sample size of people who I spoke to about it, or who emailed me about it, or Facebooked about me, there seemed to be a lot of criticism for the way Joyce performed in the ring. So I was actually quite impressed with the way Joyce did against Ian Lewison. I actually thought it was a real impressive outing from Joyce, and quite liked what I saw in there actually. I think we've got to remember that this was his professional debut. I know he's an older guy, I know he's got Olympic pedigree, I know he's got WSB pedigree, whatever, but this was a fight against a guy like Ian Lewison. And to be honest, for me, a fighter like Ian Lewison pretty much represents British title level. And the fact that Joyce beat him, and for me beat him every single round with a little bit in hand, tells me that here we have a fighter who is debuting effectively at British title level. And you'd certainly have to say the British title was contested last month between Sam Sexton and Gary Cornish. You'd certainly have to say that this form from Ian Lewison, from Joyce in beating Ian Lewison is superior to anything that was achieved in the ring between those two, or anything that either of those two has achieved in their career to date. So I think first and foremost, credit to Joyce and credit to David Haye, to be fair, for making this fight first time out. Credit to Joyce for winning every round and for stopping a competitor like Ian Lewison, to be fair. A very, very hard ask on debut. Very rare to see a heavyweight prospect starting out against a guy like Ian Lewison, and Joyce took care of business fairly well. So let's start by saying, in terms of Joyce's approach, I was impressed how he handled this fight. I watched him a few times in the Olympics, once or twice in the World Boxing Series. He boxed a lot more smoothly in this fight against Joyce than I've seen from him in the past. I don't know if it's because he's been working with David Haye and Ismail Salas. I don't know if it's because he's got a different outlook now he's in the pros. But I thought he boxed a lot smarter than I've seen in the past. I thought he looked calm, he looked educated, and he looked fairly comfortable in there. I thought Joyce's jab was really decent. I thought he used his jab really well, and I actually think he made Ian Lewison fight his fight and really outboxed Ian Lewison. From Lewison's perspective, I think tactically Ian Lewison got this fight totally and completely wrong. What I wanted to see, and as I said in the podcast last week, I actually was giving Ian Lewison a decent chance. I believe I said I'd give him a 40% chance of upsetting the apple cart here. I thought Joyce was the percentage call, but I thought Ian Lewison was definitely in this fight. And what I was expecting to see was a pattern of Joyce coming forward recklessly, Ian Lewison trying to be back foot boxing, trying to make Joyce miss, trying to counter and trying to catch him. I was expecting Lewison to adopt the approach of the wily veteran, trying to be slick on the back foot. But that really didn't happen. Joyce's jab was there from the first round. It seemed to have a level of accuracy, it seemed to have a level of power behind it. And Lewison wasn't making that jab miss, wasn't countering as effectively as I thought he might have been doing. I thought Joyce would be the juggernaut, as his nickname is, coming forward relentlessly against Lewison, and Lewison would be countering. But really, Lewison resorted to being a come forward scrapper, winging in punches from very early on in this fight. And Joyce proved to be conclusively the better man. As I say, I don't think there's a single round in this fight where you can say, yeah, Ian Lewison definitely deserved this round. So yeah, very impressed by Joyce. Very impressed by the way he jabbed, he boxed, he put punches together relatively well at times. He mixed punches up quite nicely. Saw him, head body head. I saw him, dig punches in with the same hand a few times, one after the other. He did certain things in there that you don't really expect to see from a debutant, even be it a debutant at this sort of level. Did Lewison let himself down? Well, Lewison let himself down in terms of the weight he came in at. I believe he came in well in excess of 19 stone. You know, I was looking at him in the build-up to this fight, thinking he was in good shape, but boy, I don't know how I got that so wrong. Lewison was in fairly dreadful shape, and it's very disappointing that that was the case, given that he had more notice for this fight, and really given that Ian Lewison's career has been a case of him turning up for short notice fights in bad shape and underperforming. And it's unfortunate that on this, which was his biggest stage of all, and in a fight where he's got more notice, he still turned up over 19 stone, and you know, that didn't help. He looked slow in there, he looked plodding in there, he looked a bit like a heavy bag in there at times, and when he was throwing punches, he really was sort of flailing and winging wildly, you know, with big wide hooks that a guy like Joe Joyce was really able to just stop him in his tracks by punching down the middle and sticking that jab on him and kind of negating him. You know, with regards to Ian Lewison, what I will say, he showed a lot of heart. I understand he had a lot of injuries in the fight. Certainly there was an eye injury. I understand he's broken his ankle. Clearly the fact that he'd broken his ankle is going to mean that he, you know, his boxing was affected, and was probably going to mean that he was more likely to resort to lunging in and trying to construct his way in through technical footwork and that sort of stuff. But you'd have to say it was a disappointing performance from Ian Lewison, with which he showed a lot of heart, and he gets a lot of credit for being so tough, but really didn't pose too many problems to Joe Joyce. He did clip Joyce once or twice, but really the punches were so wild and winging that they were quite telegraphed. And you know, even though Joyce was upright a bit at times, he was catching a lot of them on the gloves and that sort of thing. I also thought, apart from the difference in levels inside the ring, I also thought there was a bit of difference in levels outside the ring in terms of the corner work. I don't know if this has been covered elsewhere. I don't know if any of the other YouTube channels have covered this, so apologies if I'm just repeating something that someone else has said. I actually thought Ismail Salas was really good in the corner. I thought he was calm, he was communicating clearly, and he was giving Joe Joyce very, very simple to follow instructions that added real weight. And I actually thought Joe Joyce was responding to those instructions very well. You know, at the end of the first round, Ismail Salas was very calm. He said he wants him to use his length, use his reach, use your reach advantage, get that jab working. Instantly you see Joe Joyce come out in the second round and commit to the jab. At another point, I forget when, you see Ismail Salas say, mix it up with that jab. The jab's working well, you know, it's landing. Throw that left jab, also then throw a lead left hook. Instantly you see Joe Joyce adapt. Later on in the fight, you see Ismail Salas say to Joe Joyce, right, start to change levels with that jab. You know, jab to the body, jab to the head. You know, mix it up a bit behind that jab. And you saw Joe Joyce again reacting to that, starting to bank shots down to the body. I thought Ismail Salas was really good in there. I was really impressed by his corner work. I thought him and Joe Joyce seemed to have struck up an excellent relationship. They seemed to be tailoring what they were doing to each other, and they were listening. And I like to see that. As for Don Charles, look, I'm no boxing trainer, I'm no boxing cornerman. Don Charles knows more about the sport than I ever will. What I will say is that I thought his corner work just simply wasn't as clear as Ismail Salas. You know, how many times did we hear Don Charles say, "You've just got to show me something, Ian"? You know, there wasn't really the kind of advice. You know, there wasn't like, right, what you need to do, Ian, is take a step back and look to counter with the right hand. There wasn't really, right, throw up a double jab, try and wrap. You know, it was just, give me something, you know, show me something, you've got to do something this round. You know, it was all motivational, it was all of that sort of chat, without giving sort of crisp, concise direction as to exactly what Ian Lewison should be doing. I did actually think Don Charles should have pulled Ian Lewison out of the fight. I know Ian Lewison's a very tough guy who believes he'll have a puncher's chance in any occasion. I thought Ian Lewison looked absolutely finished after 2 rounds, and you know, in that 4th round, when he had the eye injury, I believe he had the ankle injury as well at that point, really he was just a punching bag, and his own toughness worked against him, and he sustained multiple rounds of taking punches and taking shots that won't be good for anyone. You know, I appreciate, as a trainer, as a cornerman, you want to give your fighter every possible chance. I appreciate when you've got a guy like Ian Lewison, there's always the hope he'll land some sort of Hail Mary punch and, you know, change the course of the fight. I guess he does have the classic heavyweight puncher's chance. But really, I felt it went on for too long. So I thought there was a difference in level inside the ring. I thought Joe Joyce showed some real dominance in there, and I thought Ismail Salas showed some real class outside of the ring. I really liked what I saw in Joyce. You know, there was such a calmness about him. I appreciate he doesn't have certain attributes that fans like. But even round 4, you know, round 4 for me, Lewison was pretty much gone at that point. And I know people will be frustrated maybe that he didn't, you know, swing for the fences to try and get him out of there. But I actually liked the fact that he wasn't so eager. He wasn't over eager. He wasn't Deontay Wilder swinging like a windmill, you know, up against the ropes. He was trying to think. He was aware that he had an injured opponent in front of him who was still dangerous. You know, he wasn't rushing in. He wasn't over eager. He was thought through. He was constructed in everything he did. And I give Joe Joyce, you know, a lot of credit for that. I actually think Joe Joyce's win in this fight was superior to the win that Dillian Whyte had over Ian Lewison. I thought Joe Joyce put on a more credible performance and, you know, showed more dominance over Ian Lewison than Dillian Whyte did. And I think really, if we look at Joe Joyce, if I'm honest, he's already. I've talked about Sexton and Cornish and Lewison and, you know, maybe the Dave Allens of this world you throw into that mix. He's already ahead of those sort of guys. You know, I think he's comparable level to a Dillian Whyte and a Derek Chisora. I think he's there. He really is. And you know, as I say, I'll repeat what I said. I believe he took care of business better than Dillian Whyte did. I believe his jab was more effective. I believe he gave Ian Lewison less opportunities for success. And I just believe it was a more complete performance on his debut. You know, and Dillian Whyte is someone who, whilst I don't think he's an elite fighter, he's someone who I definitely consider in the heavyweight top 20, given the context of today's division. So, you know, I think Joe Joyce can be moved quickly. Do I think he's going to be a world champion? Look, if I had to bet my house on it right now, I'd probably say no. He's coming to the game late. He's not the fastest. It's hard to tell how big a puncher he is because Ian Lewison's a very, very tough man. Ian Lewison's never been down in his pro career. You know, so it's hard to tell, but my eyes are telling me he may not be the hardest puncher in the world. My eyes are telling me he may not be the fastest in the world. Maybe he could be defensively open, especially if against a taller opponent who can offer something back in the way of jabs and long-range work. We'll have to see. But Joyce has got a lot. He's got a calmness. He's got a good jab. He's got a good engine. I was impressed by his engine in this fight. And most importantly, he's got a boxing brain. You know, and I think that he, especially with Salas in his corner, can put through cleverly thought out performances and, you know, could potentially go quite a long way in the sport. We've got a huge live heavyweight scene at present. Obviously, right at the top of the heavyweight division, you've got Joshua, Tyson Fury. You could maybe throw Hughie Fury into the mix. If you like, you've got a second tier of, you know, your Chisoras, your Whites. Maybe if you're charitable, you want to throw David Price in there. Then at your British levels, you've got your Lewisons, your Allens, your Cornices, your Sextons. I think he's already above those sort of guys. But you've got guys like Dubois coming through, Nathan Gorman coming through. I mean, those are both guys who, you know, Gorman, Dubois, Joyce, those are all guys who could easily get to the top 10 of the heavyweight division for me. I'm not saying any of them are definitely going to win world titles. I'm saying they could definitely surpass European level in relatively short order in the next 2-3 years. So real exciting times. And as I say, once again, credit goes to Joe Joyce for me. I haven't been overly impressed with what I've seen from Joe Joyce in the amateurs. You know, I didn't think this was going to be an easy fight for him, but he made it real easy work in there, and I liked what I saw. I think people are giving him a lot of criticism because maybe he didn't blow someone out of there in one round, or, you know, maybe he wasn't, you know, as athletic as, I don't know, like an Anthony Joshua or a Chris Eubank Jr. or someone like that. But I think you need to understand the nature of the test Ian Lewison provides. And if you go back and watch that Dillian Whyte fight, I think you can really see that Ian Lewison can cause issues to a lot of heavyweights. As for Ian Lewison, just a word on him, you know, you kind of get the impression that unfortunately when Lewison does come to the end of his career, it may be a question of wasted potential. Lewison had an A-grade amateur career. You know, clearly if you watch some of his fights, he's got the potential to do well in the pro sport. You know, clearly he's a guy who could have won a few fights, or a few notable fights. but that just hasn't happened. Has he been too inactive? Has he been too ill-disciplined? Has he let his weight spiral out of control too many times? All definite possibilities. I'm sure he can still get fights. I'm sure he can still be in the mix. As I said, the heavyweight division is so live right now that, you know, I'm sure he can, you know, be brought in as an opponent, and you're only ever one punch away in the heavyweight division from being, you know, back in the mix of some sort of title. But, you know, Lewison, realistically, you're going to say that balance of probability, when he comes to the end of his career, it'll be a career that people will look back and think you should have done a bit more than you actually did, which is always disappointing. As for Joe Joyce, the journey's beginning, and it's one that I'll be keen to follow, most certainly. Very interesting to see who David Haye puts him in next with. I understand initially there were talks of Lenroy Thomas versus David Allen, you know, Joe Joyce going in with the winner of those two. I'm not sure that's going to happen, because it appears that that fight is very much in limbo as to whether, you know, David Allen versus Lenroy is even going to, you know, go ahead at the minute. But let me say, if that fight were to happen, I think Joe Joyce would probably get the beating of both of those guys. I know Lenroy Thomas looked good against David Allen, but I don't think he could deal with the pressure. I think he'd fold against what Joe Joyce was bringing in against Ian Lewison the other day. I'll give you guys a quick word on MVP, Michael Venom Page, because I've seen a few messages about him. For me, I've watched the Venom Page fight. When you look at McGregor versus Mayweather, for me, McGregor was looking to box against Floyd Mayweather and got outboxed by the boxer. With Venom Page, you're seeing something completely different. Michael Venom Page wasn't trying to box in this fight. If you actually look at his stance and the construction of his punches, he, you know, didn't go into this fight with the intention of outboxing this opponent. Everything was one punches. It was all showmanship. It was all loading up with single punches. You know, he clearly was in against an overmatched opponent, and they were trying to get a highlight reel knockout. This wasn't a case of him looking to jab his way in and come into range and try and, you know, go to the body, work out his opponent. This was a case of an MMA fighter looking to fight MMA without kicks and without takedowns. You know, you actually look at the stance he was putting in there. It actually looks like he's about to throw a kick. You know, I know he's unorthodox. I know that's his trademark even in MMA. But the guy, for me, he isn't actually attempting to do boxing, and he'll get away with that when he's fighting journeyman level of opposition, because he's clearly a very gifted fighter with a lot of attributes and a lot of athleticism and, you know, ring savvy, etc. For me, what would be interesting is if he ever gives up MMA, because I think when he's still training in MMA, when that's still a full-time pursuit for him, it's going to be very, very hard for him to commit to boxing and to give up what essentially is an MMA style in a boxing ring. I think that style will get him some big highlight reels. I don't think that style will take him to highlights. You know, I think he's going to have to learn how to throw a jab, learn how to throw combinations, etc. At times in there, he did look a bit wild, he did look a bit inaccurate, but that's because the distancing is so different in boxing to MMA. You know, in MMA, and I've never done any MMA, but yeah, we know that you're having to be mindful of, is a kick coming from long range? Is a punch coming? Is someone trying to take me down? You're mindful of a lot of things. With Venom Page, in boxing, you know, if you're throwing huge punches from the other side of the ring, because the opponent knows there's only one threat, the opponent knows you're not going to kick him in the head, the opponent knows you're not going to kick him in the leg, the opponent knows you're not going to take him down, the opponent knows you're not going to choke him out. So the opponent can be completely focused with his eyes on your fists and anticipating that punches. And that's probably why we saw Venom Page looking inaccurate, because he was coming in throwing punches from MMA distances. You know, he was throwing MMA punches in terms of the technique. You know, the reason we have fast, straight, down the middle punches in boxing is because they get there a lot quicker. You know, and that's important when it comes to being accurate and, you know, making sure your punches connect with your opponent. So, you know, I thought it was an entertainment spectacle. I didn't take too much from it, and you know, clearly he's going to have to look to box if he wants to win a, you know, even a British title, so we say. But it's going to be an entertaining journey, and I think as long as we take that for what it is, I'll be interested to see more. But yeah, Michael Venom Page, I'm sure we'll cover him again in future. I'm sure we'll cover him again on the podcast. But yeah, for me, Joe Joyce, I was really taken with him. Let me know your thoughts. Drop your comments in the section below. Particularly interested to hear from you if you're one of those people who wasn't impressed by Joe Joyce. You know, I mean, let me ask you, and I'd be interested for people to answer these questions. Do you disagree with me that Joyce's performance wasn't superior to Dillian Whyte's against Ian Lewison? You know, do you perhaps disagree that Joe Joyce won every round? You know, or is it just that he's missing a sort of athleticism, a speed, a power that makes you think that he won't get to the elite levels? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know the ceiling for Joe Joyce. Let me know who you'd like to see him matched up against next, and what fights are going to be interesting, and how high you think he can go. But yeah, for me, I liked what I saw, and hopefully I've made that clear in this video. As always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you taking the time to watch this channel. If you haven't done so, please press subscribe. Quite a few new subscribers have jumped on board recently, so welcome to everyone who's new, and thank you to subscribing. Big fight week this week with Anthony Joshua, so we're hoping to surpass the 6,000 subscriber mark this week, which would be a bit of a milestone. If you want to support the channel, please hit that subscribe. Please also hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of this video. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.